Well, happy post-Thanksgiving celebrations. I was going to title my message, Leftovers, and then wear a tight shirt and let the button pop. But I decided not to. How many of you are full today? How many of you are full today? How many of you are full today? Not only of food and good fellowship and friends and family, but full with the love of our great God. Full of the love that no one else can give us besides Jesus Christ. So good to be with you. My name is Pastor Patrick, and I have the privilege of serving as the executive pastor. For those that I do not know, it's a privilege and an honor to be before you today. Well, I have a problem today. Today I'm going to cover one of the most controversial subjects in the world. It's not religion. It's not about what you do. It's not about politics. It's not about who is the biggest. It's not about who is the strongest or even the biggest or strongest nation in the world. This problem that I have today is all based around the barriers that are put up by so many people. Restrictions put in place that make it impossible at times to experience something that we did not create. Some have experienced it. Some have withheld others from it. Some are still running from it. Some are still running to it. Some are dying without it. And some are desperate for it. No one can take it from you. No one should be able to stop you from it. You can do nothing to get away from it. It will chase you down. We all need it. We all long for it, even when we don't know it at times. This that I'm going to share with you today is just exactly what we all need. It's the absolute best type of its kind throughout all the ages. This man's love. This man's amazing love. This love is relentless. It won't give up on you. It won't get tired of fighting for you. There is none that compares to this love. It is this man's love. Who is this man? It's the love of our Lord Jesus Christ. So I'm going to ask you if you would be so kind to join me today. If you have felt his love, would you stand to your feet? If you can't live without his love, would you stand up today? If you don't feel like you deserved it, would you stand up today? If you can't understand it, would you stand up today? If you have been overwhelmed by his love, would you stand up today? If it had not been for this man's love, I don't know where you or I would be. If you need this man's love, I invite you today, stand to your feet with us and give him a shout, raise your hand, just tell him that you love him. If you are here today and if you are in need of something more, if your marriage needs help, if you don't feel good enough, if you think he can't accept you, if you don't feel he can't forgive you, allow me today to introduce you to this man's love. If you've experienced his love, can we just clap unto him one time and take it to your seats? So this man's love is free. It didn't cost you anything. You can't repay it. This love is defined in its original meaning in the text today in the Greek language as agape, a type of love that is described best as charity or goodwill or benevolence, something that we do not deserve, something that we get overwhelmed with when we are blessed by it, when we experience it. It is goodwill. It is something that God's love is better described as it is the divine attribute that indicates God's disposition to be self-giving for the good of the other. My opening text today is found in Romans chapter 8, verses 37 and 39. And it goes like this: No, in all these things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus, our Lord. Now, one today must understand who the writer of this book is. We know him as the Apostle Paul, and he's writing to other believers in the church at Rome. And he opens the book to the Romans after he gives, in chapter 1, the first 6 verses of how he has room by experiencing this man's love to speak about this matter. He reaffirms who God is. And then he goes on into verse 7 of Romans chapter 1 in his opening dialogue, and he says, to all those in Rome who are loved by God and called to be saints, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. You see, Paul the writer gets to chapter 8, and then he goes on to start addressing some interesting matters. He goes through chapter 1 all the way into chapter 7 and gets to chapter 8, and then he starts talking about that love. And he writes in verse 1, and he talks about who is it that can condemn us? Sin was conquered, and as we do our best to walk in the Spirit, there should not be any room for condemnation. But sometimes we fall short, or we will eventually come up short, or feel that sin is too great and has a grip on us that is too strong. And I don't know if you can let go or I can let go, because it sometimes feels good. It takes me from my reality. The reality is, though, for all of us today, is that we really long for something more. And what that is this man's love that I'm sharing with you today. He goes on to verse 12 of chapter 8 and says, we are debtors. We have a debt. We have a debt because we are no longer controlled by or happy with this body of sin. And he tells us if we are led by the Spirit of God, then we are the sons of God. There is a hope. There is a hope. There is a hope for our future. For those who hang in there, taking this journey and its sufferings, and it will lead us to a great reward. So he tells them, be patient. If you get weak, God is there to help us in our weakness. And then he declares 3 controversial principles. Verse 31 of chapter 8, he says, God's love is always for us. He said, if God is for us, then who can be against us? He goes on to say, it is God and him only who justifies us, no one else. He goes on to verse 34. It says, no one can condemn those who turn to God. No one can condemn those who turn to God. And in the same context, Paul goes on to address a very, very critical subject about this man's love. he says, who shall separate us from the love of God? Why can Paul, the writer of this letter, declare with such confident words when it comes to the love of God? He was the Apostle Paul. He was a man who was a renegade, a man who did all to stop this man's love from infiltrating the world prior to his conversion. He understood the law and the way of religion to its fullest capacity. He lived it. He was good at it. He studied under one of the best, a man known as Gamaliel. You can find that in Acts chapter 22. He was one who worked his way into the top forms of the religious group at the time, who were known as the Pharisees, to the point that Paul explains his prior life in Philippians 3:5 as being one of the Hebrew of Hebrews, or the Pharisees of Pharisees. He was the most religious of anyone. Paul, knowing this man's love, experiencing this man's love, grateful for his love, confident in his love, says it's best that nothing can separate us from the love of God. He goes on. Romans 8:31 through 39, 31 through 36, forgive me. What then shall we say to all these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all. How will he not also with him graciously give us all things? Who shall bring a charge against God's elect? He poses a question. He says, it is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? Christ Jesus is the one who died. More than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or even a sword? But as is it written, for your sake we are being killed all the day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. So Paul declares a very, very confident and strong statement. He goes and says by stating, who can separate us from the love of God? That is strong. He had to have confidence. He had to know. He had to believe. He had to trust. He had to have, without a doubt in his life, in his mind, that there would be nothing that could separate him from the love of God. He had to be 100% absolutely, without a doubt in his mind, confident to say, I'll do whatever it takes to get you to this man's love, because I believe that there is nothing, nobody, no one, no religion, nothing can separate you from his love. But we experience 3 types of barriers to that love. Romans 8:37 through 39 tells us, no, in all things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in separation will be able to separate us. So let me dig a little deep into verse 39. So one of the barriers that we face, I use the term of wood planks. And so bear with me. This is something that someone else, our enemy, someone who is against us, built to divide you from it. When you see wood planks, you can't see everything on the other side. It's very difficult because sometimes you can see through the separation of the planks, but you have a barrier to get what's on the other side. Verse 39, the word height in its meaning, its root meaning is a barrier, a bulwark, something that is lifted up high so that you can't get over. And the Apostle Paul is using this term to say, I don't care if somebody puts a fence in front of you, that there is nothing that can separate you from the love of God. Can you put that fence up for me real quick? So this is what we see a lot of times, you and me. We see a fence that seems high. A wooden fence, we can see what's on the other side. But somehow, we allow somebody to place condemnation on us so that we cannot get to the other side. We see that there's a wall there, there's a fence there. You and I can see through the cracks of the fence. We know what's on the other side, but somehow we let our enemy tell us we are not good enough. We can't get to the other side. Put that fence back up, please. We can't get to the other side. We know that there's safety if I can get to that house, that barn over there, but there's a fence in front of me. But the Apostle Paul tells us that there's nothing nor height that can separate us from his love. From his love. Nothing. Nothing at all. And you know what's hard about this? Is because we can walk up to that fence at times. Think about your yard. If you have a yard, you have a fence. If you have a wooden fence, you know that there's some gaps between it. And you can see through to what's on the other side. And sometimes that's the most difficult because you know what's over there. We know that we need to get there, but we let somebody put condemnation on us and build these walls and try to keep us from getting there. And then we have the picket fence. This is a barrier that you can see through, but you just can't get the courage to lift ourselves out of the lowest point. And this barrier isn't even that high, but it has sharp edges at the top to kind of hinder you from thinking you can get over. And a lot of times we do this to ourselves. We build the picket fence. Our adversaries, our enemies, those that want to keep us from God, they can condemn us from that love. They build the fence, but we build picket fences. And these are difficult. Put that fence up, please. These are difficult. You see, why is this so difficult? Because I know there's something good on the other side. I know that I can even climb that fence. I can even get over that fence. But my guilt My guilt at times keeps me from climbing over that fence. And verse 39, when he talks about the depth, he says that word means from the deepest point of your life, of your poverty. He says, nor height, no wooden fence, no depth, no picket fence, from the deepest point of your poverty. Nothing from your extremist place in life. Nothing can separate you from this man's love. Nothing. But yet, our guilt, knowing that I need to get to the other side, knowing that I made a mistake, knowing that that's refuge over there, knowing that it's safe, knowing that that's really where I need to be, but somehow that guilt that we place on ourselves because we're not good enough at times, or because we don't think we can do it, or because we don't even want to try. And we put this little 4-foot picket fence up, and it just kills us because we just can't get to the other side. It's different than the wooden plank because I really can't see what's over there, so I get distracted. It's a little private. But with the picket fence, I know exactly what's over there. I know that God's love is right there, and I need to get to it. But I can't get the courage out of my deepest poverty, the pit of my own stuff, weakness, whatever it is that you experience, that I experience, confidence, whatever. I can't get enough courage just to get over that little 4-foot picket fence. And then there's bricks and mortar. And this is a barrier that people or perception can place on us. This is the impossible to measure up. Impossible. It's impossible for me to measure up. Barrier. What we can create to give you and me a measure of what one must do, what one must look like, and have in place in order to get to this man's love. This one is crucial because it creates an impossible feeling inside that says, I'll never be good enough. Give me that picture. I'll never be able to get to the other side. This brick and mortar wall makes it impossible. And this, in its original term, is what Paul's referring to, creation. He's not talking about all that God created. He's saying what we as humans do with what God created. And we place barriers from God's love. And we make it impossible sometimes to get to this love. This creation is referred to in its original language is after rabbis would use this term to describe by which a man was converted from idolatry to Judaism. It was an extreme change. It was impossible at times to be so perfect to get over that wall. And I remember getting my Bible studies and hearing about God's love and sitting down at my kitchen table and hearing all about how God loved me. And I remember believing it. And I remember knowing I needed it, wanting it, deep down inside, hungry for it. But I saw this big wall of perception. What I perceived to be what I needed to get over, to get to his love. So I would tell the person giving me my Bible studies, thank you so much. This is so good. I need it so much, but I'm not going to get baptized. I'm not good enough. I'm not ready. I don't think I have what it takes. Because I felt there was a picture of this perfection that I had to become in order to get through. And I felt that everything I had done was impossible to be forgiven. I felt that I couldn't do anything to deserve this man's love. Nothing, I'll never measure up. Nothing at all. I'll never be good enough. I cannot get over that which was created for me to try to achieve. But God, the Apostle Paul, is writing to the Romans and he's saying, look, there's nothing, no height, there's no barrier that anybody can place on you and me. There is absolutely nothing, no barrier. If it's a wood plank, we can get through that. And if your guilt, your lowest place, not even that, Patrick, will keep you from the love of God, even at your lowest, disgusting, horrible, whatever, the place where you are hungry for God, not even that place where you'll feel like you just can't get out can keep you from God's love. And not even that brick and mortar wall. Not even anything that anyone, Church of Rome, can create. Nothing in all creation can separate you from the love of God. And he writes this with such conviction and such authority. And let me share the Amplified version with you. He says, yet in all things we are more than conquerors and gain an overwhelming victory through him who loved us so much that he died for us. But he goes on to say, for I am convinced, and I'm continuing to be convinced beyond any doubt in my life, in my mind, that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything created will be able to separate you from the love of God. Nothing that we build, no fence, no wooden planks, absolutely nothing. Because Paul says, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get you to this man's love. If I have to drag you, I'm gonna do it. If I have to stand in front of this vehicle, I'm gonna get you there. I'm going to get you to know that I am fully convinced that there is nothing, not your guilt, not where you've been, not what you've done, not how you think you should be, absolutely nothing. God's love is still for you and me. It's for all of us, for those. He uses a word that is almost like to tranquilize. A big, large animal. You've seen them tranquilize an elephant to put them down and they can drag them where they need to get them. That's the term he's using. He's saying, I gotta do whatever it takes. And I'm here to tell you today, I'm going to do whatever it takes to induce you, to persuade you, to do something to let you know that there is nothing that can separate us from his love. Nobody, has anybody in this place today ever felt like you are not worthy? Has anybody besides me felt that you didn't deserve it? Has anybody in this place felt like it was too complicated? Somebody put something before you that made it impossible to measure up to what it takes to get to this man's love. Is there anybody in this place today? Is there anybody that is here that knows about this man's love? If there's anybody in this place today that needs this man's love, I am here to tell you, you can't do nothing. You can't do nothing. Nobody can do it to you. All you have to do is come. All you have to do is run. All you have to do is break down that wall, climb over that picket fence, and you know what Paul says? For that big brick and mortar wall, that's nothing. That is nothing. That is absolute. That is what someone created out of stone and out of chemicals to make mortar, to try to make it strong. But not even that. Nothing that anybody can make can separate you. I'll blow right through that with God's love. He says he is confident. He is persuaded. He is without a doubt absolutely convinced. And I want you to know that there is nothing that can separate you from this man's love. To illustrate this point further, there's a story of the prodigal son. You all may know it. But due to the length of the text, Luke chapter 15, you can read it on your own. It's a lengthy passage. But it's about a young man, a father and two sons, is the story of the prodigal son. And Jesus was talking to religious folks. He was talking to normal folks, people that were thirsty to hear, to know, to understand about this man. And Jesus talks about a lost sheep, and you may know the story and you may not. And he's describing his love. He tells stories to these people to illustrate, to describe his love for them. This man's love. He talks about a lost sheep, about if a man has 199 leave, he'll go get the one. If one gets lost, he'll go get the one. He'll chase it, he'll do whatever it takes. Talks about a widow who had 10 coins, she lost one. She'll sweep and do whatever it takes to get to that one. That's how important it was. And then he gets to the prodigal son. And this is a real popular parable. And Jesus was speaking to a mixed group of people, as I shared, differing opinions. And he says, look, the prodigal son is about a man who had two sons. The youngest wanted his inheritance before it was time. He left home and he took all his inheritance and he spent all he had on partying and wild living and just having a blast. Then he found himself in a time where famine hit that land and there was not much left for him. He had to work for someone else, feeding and cleaning up after pigs. He would find himself so hungry that he would crave the same food that the pigs would eat. And no one would give him anything. But there was a point in his life where he had guilt. And his guilt was getting the best of him. And he was telling himself, look, all right, I know where I'm at. Here's what I'm doing. I know where I need to go. I'm in a mess. Has anybody ever got themselves in a mess? Has anybody just found themselves like, man, how did I get here? How did I had it all, I thought. But how did I get to this place where now I have absolutely nothing? And he came to himself and he started talking about how he was no longer worthy to even be a hired servant. He was no longer worthy to be called a son, that he just wanted to be a hired servant. If he could just get back home, and if his father would just let him back in. And he would say to he would tell his dad, if I could just be your hired servant, that's all I want. I know where I'm at. I don't need nothing else. I know that I messed it all up. When I get to you, Daddy, first thing I'm going to say is, if I could just be one of your hired servants. That's how bad it's been for me. All I want to do, I've sinned against you. I've sinned against heaven, and I'm not even no longer to be called your son. And this is an example of God's love. Because the Bible tells us, and you can read this, that while his son was coming home, his dad was already on his way looking for him. His dad was already chasing him down. He already knew what he needed. He already knew that there was no explanation needed. And sometimes when we come to God, if you feel and I feel we have to explain to God what we've done, where we've been, how much we've messed up, how bad we did it, why we did it, and give all of our guilty reasons to God. But look at what the Father says. He says, he gets to him, he hugs him, he kisses him, but that's not my focus. My focus is this. The Father turns to his servants and he says, quick, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and put sandals on his feet. And you know what else? Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and let's celebrate. I don't know when you messed up in your life if you were ever received with that kind of love. I don't know if whenever you ran to your daddy or to your parents, or when you messed up and you ran home, if you were ever received with that kind of love. And that is this love that I'm here to share with you today. He didn't even give the son a chance to speak. Didn't even give him an opportunity. There is no word, son, that you need to say. You think you're not worthy? Huh? Don't even say it. And a lot of times, we give off the wrong perspective of God through our actions as parents, as Christians. And I say that carefully and respectfully. Because a person can make a mistake, could be a very bad one, but it's not the end of the world. Children can hurt us. We can hurt ourselves. Sin can hurt us. Mistakes we make could be very bad, but they're not the end of the world. Hurt? Yes. Embarrassing? Yes. But we have an opportunity to make these mistakes into moments where we teach about God's love. I heard the story of a well-known preacher, well-known in his community. He gets a phone call. One of his sons in the middle of the night was hanging out with a bad crowd, teenager. He gets a phone call. Pastor so-and-so. Yeah, this is him. You need to come down here right now. Your son's over here. Get to this location right away. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, you got to get over here. So the pastor runs down there, but he has a decision to make. He has a teachable moment decision to make. And what do I mean by that? So he goes on to get to the police because his son had been involved with drinking with a group of people, and they were driving and he got pulled over, and the story goes on, and he gets there, he's like, oh man, what? And they, Pastor so-and-so, come. Your son's right here, but you could take him. So he goes to the car. And this is what I think is so powerful. And he says this. He gets to the car window, and you and I, if we're inside that car, you and I, we're like, oh man, I blew it. Daddy, my dad, the pastor, the preacher, the well-known so-and-so. Man, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get my butt whipped, to say the least. Gets to the window, he rolls it down, and he says, son, I know this is what you did, but I know this is not who you are. And if you and I can get that, when we make mistakes, when our kids make mistakes, if we can get them to his love instead of condemning them, making them feel guilty, he had the opportunity. You know what you and I probably would have did when the son came home? We probably wouldn't have told them, go kill the fatted calf, go get him some clothes, change him, get his sandals on his feet, get him dressed up, get him ready. Would you agree? Silence. Because it's you know what we probably would do? Hey, go prepare the fatted calf, get the party ready, get the dance floor out, we're gonna celebrate. But You, son, stay right there and you watch while we celebrate. I'm glad you're home. But you need to realize how much you messed up. You need to know how good you had it and you blew it. And that's sometimes what we can do. Today, I'm encouraging you to not put up a fence, to not put up a picket fence, to not put no brick and mortar barriers. Get them. Get yourself. Help somebody. Get to this man's love. How do you think that pastor's son will look at God after that situation? Because a lot of times our kids see God through how we treat them and how we react and how we respond. And I know what it's like. You can stand to your feet. And I know what it's like. With permission from my son, there was a season in my life, me and my wife's life, and my son's, one of my sons, where he made some choices. And things changed. He was on a path. Probably like the prodigal son, a good path. Had an inheritance just coming. Found himself in a situation. And he comes home. Sits us down. Y'all know when your kids ask to talk to you? And he says, so, such and such. We had a choice right there. To crucify him, to make him feel more guilt, as if he didn't muster up enough courage to come talk to us. To tell him how he messed up and how good it was and why did you make those choices, and you such and such, why did you do that? But I had to put into action exactly what I learned from that pastor's experience. I know this is what you did, but I know this is not who you are. Me and Mom, we're gonna roll with you. We're gonna be with you. And so we carried on that journey. And there was times when I would get in that car to drive to this church. We were here already. And the devil, the enemy, would slap that condemnation all over my face, in my head, and I'd be driving on the 210 freeway from Highland, California. And I'd say, I can't. How can I get up there? How can I stand before people? And that enemy would put condemnation on me, and I would say, no, I know what's on the other side. And the embarrassment that I would feel, and he would tell me, you're gonna go, and people are gonna know, and now what you think is all good is gonna be all messed up. Aren't you embarrassed? And there was times I would want to turn around. And then the guilt that I would feel. But I had to muster up enough courage from my deepest pit. And I, first of all, had to show him that God is a God of love. And nothing can separate you from his love. Nor height, nor depth, nor things created on this this earth can separate you from his love. And if you're in this place today, I want you to know that there is nothing at all. This love will chase you down. This love will come after you with everything it has. This man's love is here for you today. If you need his love, if you've experienced his love, if you know somebody that needs his love, get them here. Show them. Tell them. Love them. I want to invite everyone that has experienced his love, that needs his love, that has felt his love, that knows his love. If you could just come to this place today and stand at this altar, lift your hands, and take in this man's love today. As we sing this song, you don't even have to say a word. Just